Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, back in more usual surroundings, compared to last whatever it was Wednesday. But yeah, Chelsea are actually doing some things, at least making sure that all this time without games, obviously Fulham game suspended, postponed, Liverpool game postponed, and now the bloody international break, that we actually have some things to talk about, which is good news. But it's going to be very interesting. Well, what everyone's thinking about it, what I'm thinking about it, mind you, considering we're appointing an Austrian, but we'll get into more details in just a minute. First and foremost, then we'll go to Charlie. Charlie, thank you for joining us. I know you already spoke to your expert kind of about this topic the other day. So without going into too much detail, before we explain everything in more detail to everyone, but what's your initial impression? Are you on it, like, positive thoughts ahead of this appointment, or are you a bit wary? What do you sit on Chelsea appointing, well, let's just spill the beans, Christoph Freund as sporting director or director of football, or whatever his exact title will actually be in the end?
I'll probably say cautiously optimistic. It's exciting for sure. We've needed the structure in place. That was one of the main reasons why we had the issue, like why Thomas Tuchel's not really here anymore, kind of extra responsibility and whatnot. So it's good to have that structure seemingly in place now. Potter's obviously given his blessing to the appointment, and you look at Freund's track record, and it's not bad. I'm not going to pretend that I know loads about him, because if I'm being perfectly honest, I'd never heard of him until before the Salzburg game, when the first links come out that it was pretty close. Never heard of him, so I'm not going to pretend that I know about him. But Boehly's is a fan of the Red Bull model. He likes what they're doing, and in terms of multi-club ownership, they are the best at it by far. They're much better than the City Group, much better at discovering players, etc. So you kind of look at the list of players that have come through perhaps under Freund. I'm not saying that he found them, because he didn't necessarily, but there's a team of scouts underneath him that are all part of the operation. They've unearthed some decent players. My only concerns would perhaps be, can he scale this operation up to the size of Chelsea? And because at Chelsea, you're not going to be given the opportunity to play these youngsters. It's not going to be like the Austrian Bundesliga, where you're the best team. You're going to win the league every year, so you can play like a young Sadio Mane or a young Patson Daka or whatever it is, and it doesn't really matter. But at Chelsea, you're really going to see us finding someone, say, from Africa at 17, 18 years of age, and they're going to go straight in the first team and get an opportunity. So does this operation scale up? Is perhaps my biggest concern. But I think he's got a great track record. He kind of knows how to operate within that position. And I think with working with Graham Potter, working with the recruitment guy that he's brought in from Brighton, we might still look to bring in another technical director of sorts. And I think it's an exciting department that could be heading up. But I think, my main concern is, can this operation scale up?
Exactly. I think that's the big question, really. I think Freund has proven enough at the level he's worked at, that at that level he knows what he's doing and he knows how to make that work. But like Charlie says, is it even, and not even can he do it at a higher level, but is it even possible at a higher level? Because mind you, we're not allowed. I mean, RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg sometimes have their own problems when having to play against each other and stuff. I find it a bit weird. Remember when we were obviously linked with Stephen Pagliuca as potentially being one of the owners to buy Chelsea Football Club, and then it was said, well, he can't because he, obviously had whatever percentage of ownership of Atalanta Bergamo, right? And then they were like, well, he can't do that then. How do Salzburg do it and Leipzig do it? I mean, I know it's because of the Austrian and German football ownership rulings of the 49 or 51% rule, right? But still, like, it's a bit weird to me. So exactly the question that Charlie's asking is, if you go another step higher, which Chelsea is compared to Leipzig, how do you test these players that we might potentially find out? Because when they come to Salzburg in the Red Bull model, they're not ready to play at Chelsea yet. Like, they might be really good and really talented players, but not ready for Chelsea. But then if our highest level of club is like partnership club, theoretically in whatever few years' time, we'll get to that system and talking about that in more depth in a second as well. If that is of similar level to Salzburg, maybe a bit bigger, somewhere in Belgium or in Portugal, that's still too far away from us. So how do you bridge that gap? That's one of my, where I'm like, I'm not sure how that's going to go. But we'll discuss it in more detail. Pies, thank you for being here as well. Similar question as I asked to Charlie. What are your thoughts? Like, are you confident? Are you positive? Are you a little bit concerned? What is your views ahead of going into this?
Probably so similar to Charlie, to be honest. I'm probably cautiously optimistic. Look, I think he's done a very, very good job. I do have some reservations. I do think, similar to what Charlie said and what we were just talking about off stream, is like they have, well, really, I mean, Salzburg and Leipzig, these guys, the Red Bull Group in general is one of the most impressive data scouting networks there is. Like it's been built over a number of years. It's not easy to find gems, but you know they that is their main focus. And I think with Chelsea, it's like, yeah, it's all good finding these young players and gems for the future, but is he the guy to be looking in the markets that the most common markets as well, like Ligue 1, like the Premier League, like Serie A? Is he being brought in to still buy big players, or is he going to be more of a director that is focusing on the young players for these sister clubs, and then maybe someone else comes in, I don't know, a bigger guy and runs the transfers and stuff? I'm not quite sure on the details of that yet, but it sounds like he is going to be like our director of football, which would be negotiating transfers, contracts, and everything. So I'm a little bit surprised they've gone with him over a big name, but again, I'm kind of not as well, because when they sacked Tuchel, they decided to go for Potter. They're looking obviously long term. They're looking for people that are, I guess, humble, that are working with other people over a certain amount of years, that are good characters, I guess, behind the scenes. I know I've read a lot about how Freund has very good relationships with players and things like that. So they're looking more at the character more than anything really, that more than a high profile first, which is obviously very interesting. And I think it could be very, very exciting in I say, look, 3, 4, 5 years. I'm just wondering, like, what's for the next 2, 3 years for Chelsea? What do the next windows hold? You know what I mean? Because I don't want to go into windows and just buy young talents. That's fine. We need to buy superstars as well. We're Chelsea. We need to buy big players as well. So hopefully that doesn't get lost and we don't become some sort of like it's cool being like a project club and things like that.
You don't want to be.
Cool,
You don't just want to be purely a feeder club. We still want to be a top level club. Yeah, exactly.
And again, I mean, it's like I've read that he's made over 500 million euros profit in player sales. Again, that's really, really good, and I hope that he'll improve sort of long-term sustainability, and he'll be able to get good prices for players. But Mourinho did that as well. So I'm a little bit confused why him over someone else, but I guess we'll find out soon. I'm guessing. Again, I mean, they've interviewed loads of people, so they're obviously impressed with his vision for the club. That's what I will say.
Absolutely. I think you make an important point there. So I think the way it's at least seemingly being reported, right? Like Pai said, we have been talking to and interviewed a lot of different people for this role. Obviously, it seems like our first choice was Michael Edwards, formerly at Liverpool, but he has decided to take a break from football now and didn't want to stop the break too early. And Chelsea seemingly weren't willing to wait for him to come out of his break, because we wanted to have someone soon and someone now, right? And then seemingly Christoph Freund was our second choice, I guess, and after Michael Edwards, the first choice, ahead of people like Paul Mitchell, ahead of people like Luis Campos, although Luis Campos is kind of already contracted to PSG. So was he really available? It's a difficult one, considering he just joined the summer, right? So it's a difficult one. Now, let's have a little bit, because obviously everyone does different amounts of like research where things like this happen. Obviously, myself, Pies, Charlie, people like us would probably read a bit more than some of you in the chat. I'm not saying all of you. Some of you might even know more than we do. But some of you might not have the time or the bother to do all of the research. So just a little bit of background information. So he's Austrian. Somehow, Chelsea have appointed my countryman, or are about to appoint my countryman, as the sporting director, which I find a little bit crazy. No idea how we got to this situation. But hey, here we are. So yeah, Austrian, used to play in the Austrian Bundesliga, used to play football as well. And then since 2006 has basically been working in various different roles for RB Salzburg, starting as like team manager, which is like booking hotels for away trips and sorting out media things with the players and stuff like that, into slowly but surely going up in the ranks, especially when Ralf Rangnick left from to go from RB Salzburg to RB Leipzig. And then he kind of slowly but surely took over. And I think, what was it, the 14-15 season? Pretty sure, if I'm not misremembering what I read, he took over as full sporting director. And, I can just bring something up on screen that Pies tweeted. I think it was yesterday, it might have been today. Just a little list of players that were signed to RB Salzburg while Christoph Freund was in charge. Now, something I was telling Pies and Charlie just before we went live is the difficult part with this is how much credit do you give him for that? Because like I've just said, he basically took over this RB system from Ralf Rangnick after Ralf Rangnick was the guy that kind of started it. That invented is maybe the wrong word, but just built it off from the ground. And then once he was done building it in Salzburg, he went to Leipzig and continued building it there, right? So Freund just kind of took over, obviously improved it, but took over kind of that project, if that makes sense. And like they have, RB Salzburg have one of the, as you can see, there's a lot of players with African heritage on this, right? Like Patson Daka, Naby Keita, a lot of players. And they have a partnership academy like in Africa, which helps them be so good at finding these African talents, which it is great if we could get those. Obviously, we'll get to those little, question marks, shall we say, in a little bit. And then obviously what they do also focus on is just a lot of scouting around where Austria is, basically, right? Just in the surrounding areas, just because there it makes it much easier to convince players come here, because it's one thing to go to Peru and find some 15-year-old that's really good. Well, for work reasons, for legal reasons, it's not always as easy to get someone like that over here then. But if you're in the surrounding areas, it makes it much easier. Now, thanks to Brexit, it's not anywhere near as easy in the UK anymore as it is, for example, doing that in Austria or in Germany because of EU laws and stuff. But still, it still makes it a little bit easier to move players around. And then I listened to a podcast with Nazar Kinsella, and he was like, Salzburg just have this thing, or the whole Red Bull structure. They look in places for players that no one else just looks. It's not that they always beat out hefty competition. They find players that no one else finds. And then you end up with Erling Haaland is maybe not the best example because obviously a lot of people knew about him when he was at Molde in Norway already. But Sadio Mane, Dayot Upamecano, Adeyemi, that obviously he's German of nationality anyways. Patson Daka. There's a lot of these players that no one would have heard of before. And Salzburg and Christoph Freund just turn up with them. Now, I don't want to give myself the big ups too much and say, oh, look at how amazing I am, what this inside info I have. But being Austrian, I have a friend that used to work for RB Salzburg until not too long ago. And I texted him. I was like, mate, please tell me what do you think about him? What do you think he's going to do at Chelsea? How do you think it's going to fit in? And what do you just think about him? So he started that off with, which I found very interesting. That's how he sent me a whole 7-minute voice note explaining all his thoughts, basically. And he started off by saying, well, he isn't exactly a natural leader, which I found very interesting. Now, and I'm not even trying to use this as a con for him because of something that Charlie touched on earlier. There is still rumors out there that Chelsea might actually... Oh, I'm going to click the wrong button here. I didn't want to highlight it yet. Sorry, Chocolate Man. We'll get to that. But now I lost my train of thought completely. Basically, there is rumors still that we are going to appoint another big sporting person, whether it's a technical director or whatever, while now Christoph Freund will become the sporting director. Maybe this him not being as much of a leader, but more just good at what he does. He called him just a workaholic. Now, what's interesting, he said he had a lot of offers, shall we say, over the last few years from Germany, from the Premier League. And within the club, he told me, it's always been, as soon as there was any rumor about it, in the club, they always made it very clear, this is all scrap, I'm not going anywhere, I'm fine, just to, make sure there's no drama in the club and weird stories flowing around. But on this occasion, obviously, he didn't do that because he's coming to Chelsea. But that is interesting. So we're not like the first big club that all of a sudden turn up with the idea of, he'd be quite good. A lot of bigger clubs have done that. Not maybe the size of ourselves as Chelsea, but still a lot of bigger clubs than RB Salzburg. He just happened to always turn them down. My friend at RB Salzburg also told me he's actually a little bit surprised that Freund accepted it. Not because Chelsea isn't big enough or not because Chelsea isn't paying enough, but just because he's turned down so many things just with the explanation. He wants to just be at home with his family, in Austria, apparently rides his bike to work every day, no matter if there's a meter of snow or 40 degrees heat. It just always goes to work by bike. I'm like, yeah, he seemed a little bit surprised that he's just going for this big move. And his minor concern, before I get to all the positives, which I will tell you about in a second as well, and then we'll have a little bit of, I'll open the floor, shall we say, to the boys and them kind of sharing their thoughts as well. Just how do I best word it? Because obviously I'm trying to translate from German to English here without trying to lose anything. He's not sure whether it could be too big of a step for him. Like Charlie said a little bit earlier, he knows what he's doing, but will he, because he's not a natural leader, will he have the ego big enough to do what he needs to do at this level of a club, because at this elite level of no matter what industry it is, whether it's sports and football in our case, or whether it's business in another case, this world is run by egos. So his minor concern is, will his kind of leadership and ego be big enough, or will it take him too long to kind of fight for his place? But obviously, like we also touched on, I think Pice mentioned it, we appointed Graham Potter, which is kind of, obviously they're not necessarily similar in terms of how they do everything, but in terms of the ilk of what they're in, like kind of this promising but less well-known type person for their specific roles. It kind of does make sense. So if we're trying to build a bigger thing, it makes sense. Now, one of the big pros is he mentioned to me about Christoph Freund is that he's an incredibly good judge of character, which is very useful for players, like scouting players, because it's not just about is a player good or is a player bad, because you're scouting players and you're picking players at the age of 16, 17, 18, right? And how many, like how, even at Chelsea, how many players have we signed and have we had that are clearly super, super talented? But it's not always the talent that decides on how good you end up being, because there's attitude, there's background. Like, are you going to have people behind you that are going to tell you the wrong things? And, you know, a little bit like a devil on one shoulder, an angel on the other one, like influenced in the wrong way. Are you going to work hard enough to actually turn your talent into the final product that it can be? Like, it always, like, there's always the saying, hard work will outdo just talent without hard work. That's just how it is, right? And he's apparently very good at judging those things. And that's why they have such a good success rate of when they pick players, that they don't just end up as this talent that then ends up going nowhere. But obviously, how many of these players, other than Haaland and Mane, how many have made it to the level that Chelsea want the players to be at? Because, I mean, Konrad Laimer is a good player. Now, I'm not expecting anyone that's not Austrian to know or a fan of... there's Leiner and Laimer. One of them plays for Leipzig, one of them plays for Gladbach. I think he's the one at Leipzig. So if you're not a Leipzig fan or Bundesliga fan or Austrian, you might not know about him. Is he quite good enough for us? Maybe, maybe not. But all the other ones are like, you know? So it's going to be interesting how that's going to translate. But the next thing I'm going to say, and the last thing in terms of, you know, inside information before I'm going to stop pretending to be this in the know person. Not pretending. I have actually been told this, but, you know, is basically how he praises him so highly is that he is, like I said, a complete workaholic, and he just never does anything, how do I best word it, off the mark, if that makes sense. So there is a plan, and that plan is 100% followed, and he's really good at spotting players for that what he wants. So RB Salzburg and to some extent also Leipzig have this like 4-4-2 diamond, basically in this structure, which players fit this structure, and then they find the players that fit it perfectly, and they always fit it perfectly, and that's what we need. But then now the question, and I'll go back to you, Charlie, do you worry that we can find these players, but if we find them at 18, we can't just throw them in, like, especially finding this as many as Salzburg find, we can't just throw 6 new 18-year-olds in every year like RB Salzburg do, right? So we will potentially have feeder clubs. Chelsea are apparently looking at buying, you know, clubs in various different areas. I've recently found out Man City have bought Palermo, or at least parts of Palermo. Not the city, mind you, the football club. So that's interesting that they're doing that too. But apparently we're looking in Portugal, in Belgium, in the US, of course, and in Brazil as well. But will any of these clubs be close enough to us that we can actually make use of all of this? What do you think, Charlie?
I don't know. It's interesting. I think, like, for sure, you know, as I said earlier, the fact that, you know, Salzburg are the best team in the Austrian Bundesliga by miles, it makes it much easier to go and do that, because you're able to go and take those risks, as it were, at Chelsea. You know, we as fans, we'd be fuming if we saw like a load of random sort of 17, 18-year-olds on the team sheet every week. Like, you're not afforded that luxury to kind of bed them in. So I think that's where the multi-club thing comes in. And I know that's not going to come in straight away, but if we can, like, Todd Boehly clearly is a fan of that multi-club ownership, which is why he's so keen on Christoph Freund. The guy knows it inside out. So that I think they look at that in the next few years to accumulate a couple of clubs or whatever, and then to be able to send those players out to there. But it's all very well doing that. But the City group, right? They own a few clubs. Name me one player that's actually regularly playing for Man City that's developed at one of their clubs, at one of their feeder clubs. No one. So it doesn't always work. I know Red Bull have got it well with Salzburg to Leipzig. that works. Players step up to the German Bundesliga and they play in well, but like this doesn't mean instant success. The City group, no one is from any of those clubs is playing regularly for Man City. So whilst they've got multi-club ownership, it's not really beneficial for them in terms of getting decent players for the first team because they just haven't got any. But I don't know, mate. I'm not sure how it's going to work because obviously with the new loan rules and stuff, that makes it harder for us to kind of loan loads of players out. So why again another reason why the multi-club model is attractive, but I'm not sure. But I can't see right now like how it 100% works. I'm sure there'll be players that are good enough to come into the first team and get minutes, but are we just going to put them in the academy in the 23s? I'm not really sure. I don't really know how it's going to work.
And I think that's an important point, and I'll take that to Pice as well. I think what's important is even if Chelsea do go to buy these feeder clubs, if we want to call them that, even if there's probably a better, more suited and nicer word for them, I don't think that's necessarily what we as fans should concern ourselves with now. Because even if those will be bought and acquired potentially reasonably soon, we don't know for sure. Until that whole system is in place, like the Red Bull idea started many years ago. It didn't just happen from one day to another that it just worked, right? So I don't think we should focus on that side of the thing too much. And that's why I think Pies made an important point earlier. So we see how there is a structure in place and in plan for how we're going to do this in a few years, basically, because that's what we're kind of setting ourselves up for now. But the question is, how are we going to do it now? Now, I do think that someone like Christoph Freund has because you can say, okay, that's only the only players he finds, but he's also been working for RB Salzburg. So he couldn't aim higher. Number one, he didn't have the budget. And number two, he didn't have the size of club and the pull of club to go for bigger players that would be suitable to Chelsea. So, and that's why it's a little bit of a risk, or maybe rather than a risk, let's call it an unknown, because there is a good chance he's also very good at that. But because he's been at RB Salzburg, we just haven't really, no one has been able to find out. Because, of course, RB Salzburg don't have the money to spend 80 million nearly on Wesley Fofana. Of course, they can't spend that kind of money. But maybe he's also going to be very good at that. Or it's going to be a case of something that Nizar Quintela on a podcast hinted at, saying, well, we might have a situation where we'll have a sport director for all of our clubs combined, all of the few that we might potentially add to our structure, to our system, and then have an individual, almost technical director at each smaller club. So now whether Christoph Freund is going to be the one that always remains at Chelsea, or whether he's going to be the guy to oversee it all, I don't know. We don't even know if that's actually going to happen. But we might also just get someone else in. Like I say, there was still talk about Paul Mitchell to come in to Chelsea now. And maybe he's just supposed to be then the guy for the right now transfers, while Christoph Freund is just given the job of build everything so that in 4 or 5 years' time, we basically can buy one superstar a year, maybe two, and the rest of the squad will just automatically always be improved by these players that we chop from other clubs or from our own other clubs. So, Pice, how do you see that? Do you see it as a case of, and obviously you don't know for sure either, but what's your feeling, I guess? Do you think Christoph Freund is just going to be, we'll just have to see whether he can also do the super club side of transfer dealings, basically, and, not scouting himself, but knowing who to scout, knowing what to scout, knowing what level of player to go for. Like I said, RB Salzburg don't sign players over 23. We will hopefully not only sign players under 23. Do you know what I mean? So how do you see that going? Or do you genuinely see it as a valid possibility that we could just get someone else in and let two of them do the job? Because one thing important to mention, maybe people haven't heard about this, Graham Potter seemingly was consulted. He wasn't like asked, pick who you want as the sporting director, but he was consulted on the potential appointment of Christoph Freund. And seemingly Graham Potter was, happy with it or accepted it. Also, one other thing, sorry, Pies. Nizar Quintela also said that when he was at the academy game or the under-19s game between Chelsea and Salzburg, obviously the afternoon before we played them in the Champions League in the under-19s in the UEFA Youth League, that Christoph Freund was actually already at the time talking to a load of staff at Chelsea, like talking to them. It's not like everyone was seemingly already aware that this was going to happen, because no one was seemingly having any secrets. Everyone was just having a chat and everyone was getting to know each other already, which is good. But Pice, sorry, now that I've added a little bit of information for the people, what do you think?
It's very, very hard to say. I see two possibilities, and I mean, it's not like I've obviously these are the possibilities anyway. But I think, he's either going to come in and be sort of that actual director of football where he does negotiate the transfers and targets and everything and the contracts and things. But I guess that would really depend on how much, I guess, the ownership group rate him. Or I see a possibility where, like, as you said, like a technical director, as in Paul Mitchell comes in, really is kind of like the director of football. He is just there to strictly negotiate the transfer targets whilst Macaulay and Freund, or is that how you say his name? Freund? I'm trying, but yeah, I'm trying. But I could see a situation where they sort of like find the targets and then Paul Mitchell then goes and completes the deals. But again, I think that's a lot within the setup. I don't know if you need that many people. And that's one thing I'm wary of. I don't want Chelsea to employ too many people because then you have people who want different things and make different decisions, and that leads to arguments and stuff like that. But I feel like with the profile of people they're going for, it is like these sort of almost like peoples. Like they are sort of, they seem easy to work with. Freund seems very capable of working with agents and seems very capable with, as you said, like picking out characters for the squad. And it's just my one concern is, or just question really is, like, as you said earlier, if he is come in just to sort of say, well, say Potter and Macaulay give him, say, we need this position, we need this target, we need him in this formation, this system. It's like, well, I mean, most director of footballs can take that on board and go out and get the right players. So it's like, why him? You know what I mean? I don't really understand. Why not then go for Luis Campos, who has more connections and knows more agents and things like that? That's where I'm a little bit confused, and why I think he may be used more as a person to run these feeder clubs. But I guess we'll have to see. I'm just a little bit confused on it. Like, why? I keep saying why him. I mean, it's not like he's some unknown guy. He's done a very, very good job. It's just like, why not
I
Luis
guess the
Campos or
question
something
you're
like that?
almost
You know what I
like,
mean? Like it's
without putting words into your mouth, what I'm taking from what you're kind of asking is basically just that very question. Is he just supposed to replicate / potentially replicate plus improve upon the Red Bull system and basically make us a better Red Bull system? Which the idea of that sounds like the worst thing I've ever had in my life, just because I really hate Red Bull. But obviously their structure clearly works. It doesn't work to the level of winning trophies, but is that possible in Germany with Bayern? That's difficult. Maybe no one could do that. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, with the rules that they have in terms of how much a company can own of a club, how much money therefore can be invested and stuff. So maybe it's a little bit difficult. But I guess what you're saying is, will he be in charge of doing the whole bigger project structure alone, or will he be doing that plus what you're saying now? Because it's clearly not just Chelsea sporting director. If it's just that, I think Pice is correct. Then we might have just gone for someone different with more experience at that type of level. But I guess when you look at when you think about what we're apparently trying to do of building a few like feeder clubs, which the big benefit you obviously have from that is that it makes scouting in various different players much easier, because you don't just randomly have to send individual scouts to places. You have if you have a club there, you have a whole setup of a whole network in each of these regions, right? So that makes the whole structure easier. But like I say, the question is just, will he have to do both? And if he does, will he be able to do both? And I guess it's just difficult to really know that for sure in advance. Now, Charlie, before I go to you, let me quickly react to this.
I'll just say one more thing as well.
Of course.
I'll just say one more thing.
Sorry.
I was just thinking as well, like, if Todd Boehly, I know he didn't really get on with Tuchel in the summer, but if he's so convinced that Graham Potter is the guy to sort of get on with and build this long-term project around, rather than just rushing to employ someone before the World Cup, why would you not maybe take on that role for another January, and then in the summer maybe Edwards would be more inclined to come because then he gets more time out of football? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why? I do see. I know they've interviewed a lot of people and stuff, but I do see an element of just, we've done so many things so quickly here, and it's like I'm impressed, but at the same time, I'm a little bit worried. I'm not going to lie that we may be sort of throwing everything in the basket way too quickly. Like, as you said, like, I hope this guy is a smart guy, because it's very interesting that you said that he's always like declined offers and Salzburg have never really entertained it. So like, It's now that
I
Chelsea
don't
have
think
come
it was a
along.
case of the Salzburg didn't let him go. He just didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I read something that he declined Ajax, and that got my interest, which was because I was like, okay, if Ajax are interested in this guy, that I'm interested, because I think Ajax are a brilliant football club in terms of
Absolutely.
just like the structure and the history and stuff. So, but
Mhm.
again, like it's like he's either getting paid an unthinkable, unturnable down amount of money, or
Yeah.
he's really, really interested in what they're trying to build. And I kind of hope
I
it's the
guess it
second
could
one.
just be as simple as, well, a few years ago, his children were younger. Maybe he now feels more
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
comfortable either with moving his children to a different place or leaving his children kind of without being there every day type
I mean,
thing.
it's not
Maybe
too
that's to
far
do with it
anyway,
as
is it,
well.
really,
But
with England,
go
to
on.
be fair? It's not Austria. I mean, it's not that far from England. So
No.
I guess it's not too much of an issue. But it is interesting that he's not jumped at big clubs before. But Chelsea's just, straight in agreement found. I'm like, this is very interesting. Like, I want to know more details. I want to hear an interview. You know what I mean? That's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Absolutely. And on that note, actually, something I wanted to mention before I take it to Charlie in the super chat. What I was told is his English isn't very good. Now, 2 years ago, he barely spoke any English. Now it's got better, but it's still like as he called it, average Austrian level of English. So please don't use me. I have a very high level of English. Okay, I'm sure people have noticed that by now. But not everyone in Austria speaks English like me. Okay, so that I find weird, especially because we just had this German-speaking manager, where that would have been way less of a problem. But we sacked the German-speaking manager and appointed an English manager. So obviously, I'm sure he can take some lessons if he needs it, but that I do find strange. Oh, but just to clarify, I'm sure Python and Charlie know about this, but maybe some people watching don't. So how apparently this whole conversation started is that we were interested in Benjamin Sesko, obviously their striker, who didn't get the goal, but was one of the Salzburg's better players on Wednesday against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. When we were in talks about potentially signing him, that's when apparently Boehly got to know Christoph Freund and was just super impressed. And that's when they did more, background research and then some talks and stuff. And that's how they came to this conclusion. Now, let me finally get to the super chat. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have anything else that you want to add that you think we might be forgetting upon, please do use the super chat function to make sure that I do see your message. But Tuckleman says, Edwards doesn't want the role until next summer. Campos is at PSG. Other than Mitchell, who'd you bring? We need a proper structure now, not till next summer. I'm not 100% sure what you're trying to say, if I'm honest, because what you're basically saying is, okay, Edwards didn't want it, Campos is kind of unavailable, so we had basically Mitchell and I guess Freud. But like Pies and Charlie said, who knew of? I mean, I had heard his name because he works in Austria, but did I know much about him? Even I'll be honest, no. Until I then started to do some more research in the last few days. But well, if there was Freud out there, I'm sure there was someone else none of us had ever heard of out there elsewhere. So like maybe there are other options, but whether those would have been any better or not, of course, I don't know. But I guess the main point of this is, if we want a structure, like a big structure and project, right, that's going to be not self-sufficient is maybe the wrong word, but almost is going to be the base of our future success. I guess the sooner you started, the better, right, Charlie? Or do you think it would have been a better situation to just wait a bit longer? Because what difference would it have made to do, say, another window with Boehly being in charge?
I guess it depends how desperate they are. I mean, if Edwards was the guy, he's obviously the kind of the best in class, the standout candidate. But I would imagine that if Chelsea obviously spoke to Edwards, and if Edwards said, "Look, I'll take it next summer," then I believe that Chelsea probably would have just waited until next summer. They would have just kind of gone along in the January window what they did in the summer, and they just would have waited for Edwards. I'm not sure how Edwards was actually keen to come at all, because surely if he was the guy we wanted, you just wait till the summer, because it's just the January window, isn't it? It's not an awful lot of stuff to do. So I think they would have waited for him personally. So I just think that perhaps Edwards wasn't keen to maybe come, or he wasn't as keen as we were kind of led to believe, because it makes no sense not to wait for him if he was the one we desperately wanted, considering it's not a long time to wait.
I guess we don't know how long of a break he does want. Maybe he wants like a 3-year break.
Well, exactly. Or he could have said that. I want a couple of years out of the game, where I want an extended period. In which case, you've got to go and assess other options. But yeah, I'm not sure. But I think it'll be interesting to see if we do bring someone else in alongside. But like Pi said, you don't want too many people. Yes, it's exciting hearing these names. Your Paul Mitchells and whatnot. Great guys, done really good work at their respective clubs, but you don't want too many sort of big personalities in the same department in terms of, it's good to have, disagreements and constructive conversations, but when you get too many people on board, it's too many opinions, and then it's harder to come to an agreement. You almost want kind of a smaller circle, which kind of makes handling those sort of disagreements a bit easier. So whilst I wouldn't be against kind of another guy coming in, you've got to be careful not to kind of overpopulate the department as such.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was hinting at earlier when I was telling you that I was told that he's not exactly like a natural leader. He doesn't like that. He isn't always the big guy in the room. I mean, I don't know Todd Boehly, do I? But Todd Boehly is probably that, like, I'm in charge type of guy. And like you say, you don't want too many big personalities. But if he's not that big of a personality, but just really, really good at his job, maybe that's exactly what we need. And that's why I have hope is maybe the wrong word, but I have a feeling that we're going to get someone else. And I don't know if that's going to be Paul Mitchell or some other Donny that a lot of us will have never heard of. But I have a feeling that we're going to get someone else. Now, I don't know if this someone else is like this idea that I was talking about, that Freund says is then going to be in charge of the whole system, including the potential feeder clubs. And then whoever else we bring in is going to be purely in charge of Chelsea long term. Or whether they're both going to be in charge of both things. That we don't know. But Python, I'll take that question back to you then as well, Charlie. We were also talking to someone, Mitzloff, I think his name is, from RB Leipzig. Now, I was told, why would we ever talk to him? Because seemingly everybody else in the industry seems to not want to have anything to do with him other than Leipzig. But seemingly we decided against that anyway. But now we are getting one guy from Red Bull. And apparently our owner, Todd Boehly, seems to be such a huge fan of the whole Red Bull system. Pies, do you want to be a Red Bull system? Because it seemingly we're steering closer towards what Red Bull are doing than to what City are doing. Now, of course, City are expanding their own system more and more themselves. Like I just said, recently acquiring part or the whole of the Palermo Football Club. But of course, everyone knows they have New York City FC, New York City, whatever the club is called, and Melbourne City FC they have as well. But they're in America and Australia. I mean, neither of those places turn out with that many great footballers. Sorry, Christian Pulisic fans. But do you know what I mean? So that seems to be more a brand thing. The Palermo thing seems to be more of a useful feeder thing. But do you want to be that type of club, Pice? Or is that what you're worried about, that you don't want us to be turned into that?
I think I want something in the middle, or maybe a little bit of both. Because I think what could be incredibly exciting is that we have these feeder clubs and we have the likes of Freund, and maybe we get a different scouting system. Maybe he brings, I don't know, some of his own ideas and, I don't know, data and computers and whatnot, systems. And I think could be incredibly exciting that we do sign some of these younger players that could go straight into our first team. But at the same time, mix it with, a big sort of 70, 80 million pound signing every summer. Like I don't know. I know he's young, but like a Rafael Leao. Like, what I don't want to do is, I don't want to just become like I was going to say like an Arsenal.
Only sign Chukwuemakers every summer, basically.
Yeah, like you want something that gets the fans excited. But at the same time, it's funny that I say this, because most of the 80, 100 million pounds, 70 million pound signings are like 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, like that are just that have actually been that have actually been scouted by other teams that are now turned into that. Like I keep thinking this. Mate, I watched the Napoli game the other day, and I've been tuning in to watch this winger. I can't say his name, but the guy they signed,
he's incredible. I love him,
mate. He's he's unbelievable. He'd be one. Just watching him, I know he'd be one of the best wingers in the Prem.
He looks like Jack Grealish, just way better.
Mate, he's rapid. He's skillful. He's just everything. And they signed him for some unknown club. I've never heard of him in my life.
Yeah, he comes from Georgia. Yeah, I've never even heard of a footballer from Georgia until him.
But you know what I mean? And now you see Napoli next summer, they charge £78 million for him. That's what Chelsea could do. We could find these gems, and we could have these guys that are just, you know what I mean? Like, holy shit, like, they've found this guy. Look, they're going to turn him into a 60, 70, 80 pound player. And that is what I think Graham Potter would be very good at, is his development of players. Is like, right, we could really like look at Brighton, bro. Like Caicedo, Cucurella. Like I know Cucurella was a bit more known for Getafe, but he was nowhere near like a 50, 60 million pound player. Like if we can sign these players that can go into our first team, but are I don't know, can be sold for a lot in the future. I don't have an issue with that. You know what I mean? I have an issue is like where we just sign these young talents and they either go wrong or they're not at the level required to compete for Chelsea. That's like, I don't want to lose our culture identity, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to turn into this sort of production system where we're just buying young talents. We kind of have like a, I don't know, where we fight for top four every season. Like, I want to see progression. I want to fight for the title again. I don't want to just, you know what I mean, spend less and less money, but get excited by, say we sign 5 young talents a summer, but we spend 100 million. Like, they could paint that out as exciting. That's not exciting for me unless they really, really good and they improve our first team. Then it's smart. You know what I mean? So it's like, how does that balance out with being Chelsea as well and not losing that identity as a club that we are, that have won trophies for so many years?
Absolutely. And I think that's the important part to mention. Number one, he will probably bring some of his own personnel. What exactly, in what roles that will be, who knows? But I think that's the important part because, like you said there, Red Bull do this with an aim basically to sell, right? Sure, they want to make RB Leipzig better, but they're realistically not going to knock Bayern off the top stool in Germany, right? So what is their biggest aim? Okay, compete, but realistically, if some bigger club wants a player from Leipzig, they're not going to be able to say no. Whether that happened with Werner, whether that happened with Upamecano, whether that happened with Konate, whether that happened with God knows how many other players, and it will happen with more and more over the years. Now, obviously, in Nkunku, that's obviously probably the next big guy to come out of that Red Bull system and go to a huge club. But I guess the thing is, if you think about this as a longer term structure, one positive and one negative, right? So the big positive is if you don't think about today, but if you think about in 5 years, you don't even need, like, you can still buy one big player a year, but you shouldn't really ever come to the position where you need like 3 or 4 more experienced players a year. Because when you think about it, say we have a squad now, so the younger players now, in a few years' time, will already be those experienced players. So if we then sign players that don't flop, and that's obviously the idea of, getting someone like Christoph Freund, that we stop signing players that turn up as flops, right? So then if you have them in the squad already, then in a couple of years' time, they're the experienced players. And then you add some younger ones, and then slowly those older ones then leave. And then they become the older ones. So these initially younger ones become the older ones, and then you add some new ones into there. But the problem is, obviously, if you have a feeder club system, if you don't sell a lot of them, only very few, like 1, maybe 2 a year, and even that's like on a regular yearly basis, nearly impossible. Just look at the Chelsea Academy. I mean, we have the problem purely from Academy, let alone feeder clubs of worldwide scouting, where you're like, we had this generation of, because of the transfer ban with Frank Lampard, where Mason Mount, Reece James, Tammy Abraham, Tomori, in the end, kind of Chalobah, even though he was brought through by Thomas Tuchel, of course, and a few others, I guess Billy Gilmore, even though obviously he's now not here anymore, where they all came in at once. Hudson-Odoi a little bit before that, Loftus-Cheek before that. But because then we had so many young players, it kind of now made it difficult for the likes of Billy Gilmore and for the likes of Levi Colwill to actually make that last jump into the first team, because we already had so many young players. We couldn't quite afford to add even more young players. So I guess we will still sell a lot of the players that we will acquire through this system if we do end up going for a similar system. But what I do believe then is that exactly those sales will still fund our signing of the 1 or 2 huge players per summer. And that's why I have hope that this can really work, also at the very highest level. I think my hope is also that Christoph Freund has now spent 12 years or even more at RB Salzburg, learned a lot of things from a lot of different people in the comfort of his home. And I hope, I don't know this though, has kind of found a way to not only do that, but make it even a tad better. Because like Pice asked the question earlier, why him? Now, a lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about Todd Boehly, especially with all-star games and relegation tournaments and all sorts of things. But what he doesn't seem like is a guy that makes stupid decisions for himself, right? And because he's now owner of Chelsea Football Club, he clearly wants us to be successful. He's American. Americans always want to be successful. So he clearly doesn't want us to finish 8th, right? I know maybe some other American owners, but Boehly doesn't seem like that type of guy. And he also eventually, whether that's in 10 years when he potentially sells it, or if it's just generally making money in a few years' time, not today, but eventually he will not just want to have lost £5 billion. He won't have wanted to have done that. So because of that, and then picking someone relatively unknown, especially to the English football world, makes me quite positive that if he picked him, there has to be a good reason to pick him. Otherwise, I don't think someone like Boehly would have picked him. Do you know what I mean? That's why I have a little bit of hope. But that's the same as go back 6 months. And when we were, talking about owners, it was all the same. Like, we didn't know for sure. It could have gone bad. It could have gone great. And that's a similar situation where we have with Freud now, which is more uncertainty, I suppose. But there is a chance it goes really, really well. The question is just, how soon will it go really, really well? Who did I ask the last question? Was it Charlie or was it Pies? I do apologize.
It wasn't me. Charlie has not spoken in a while.
Yeah, there
Ask
you go.
Charlie.
There you go. I'll ask Charlie. Do you agree with that hope of mine? Do you think that that's how it can work? Or do you have have you heard holes in what basically I was just talking through in terms of, you bring a few in and then they turn old and then you bring a few new ones in. But like I say, you can't do too many a year. So what do you do with the extra players? Well, you sell them and therefore you fund the big signings. Do you see that?
Yeah, it's possible for sure. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to get the balance right, isn't it? Because as you say, you ideally don't ever want to be in a situation like we've been in this summer where you're having to buy 3, 4 key players like every window. You want to be adding 1 or 2 for the first, to go into the first team, and then you want to be kind of just either, kind of promoting players up or just filling the squad out a little bit. It was a very unique situation for us to be in. I think it can work twofold. If it works really well, great. You get players on the cheap to cut that can come into the first team. And if it doesn't, like we've seen with Cobham already, you can still produce very good footballers, maybe not to a Chelsea standard, but can go and play elsewhere in the Premier League and go and play elsewhere in Europe. And you then make money to fund the signings for future windows, like selling the likes of, I know Lukaku didn't work out, but we spent 100 million
like him that hopefully would work out.
Yeah. But we spent 100 million on him. But in theory, we raised all that money through selling the likes of Abraham, Tomori, etc. So it can work both ways. You can get players in, and you can also, get players that aren't quite good enough for Chelsea, but you can sell them for good money. And then that in turn can help you fund buying some top players. But it doesn't always work like that. You're not always going to get the list that you brought up on the screen earlier, that's great for great players done really well. I wonder how long the list is of ones that were shit. It's like for all the good ones, there's going to be a load of shit ones. And that's just the way it works. But you just got to hope more often than not that you bring through a few decent ones rather than the shit ones being a long list. But that will be the case. There'll be ones that kind of work out well, and there will be ones that don't work out. You've just got to hope that more work out than don't. But there's no guarantees.
And we have to hope that those that don't work out, we figure out that they don't work out at the feeder clubs, not only at Chelsea. That's the idea, right, of this whole feeder club system. You figure out who's good enough and who's not before you ever take them to Chelsea. So that for what Melinda said here, that you limit the ones that fail by the time they make it to Chelsea drastically. Now, of course, there will still always be some. That happens with everyone, whether it's proper players that you sign, like a Lukaku, you signed for 100 million and failed. But the idea is that because of the feeder clubs, and not only the feeder clubs might not be at that level, but what the feeder clubs mean is that you know them from a much younger age.
Yeah.
Therefore, you should have a much better knowledge of them as a person. And like I said earlier, it's not only about talent; it's about their background. And by background, I don't mean heritage. I mean, what is their family like? Are they going to be pushing him to work hard? Are they going to be as soon as he makes the big first contract, it's going to be a negative influence? That's the kind of thing I mean. How hard is he going to work? Are they going to work, right? So I guess the idea would be that the ones that fail, they fail at the feeder clubs. And the ones that don't fail, they also won't fail with us. I guess that's the idea. But to take it back to this other thing, and I'll ask that again to you, Charlie. Melinda says here, we already have the best, or at least one of the best youth player systems in the UK, the best academy, or one of the 2 best academies with Man City, right? Do you worry at all that number one, we're going to have less of our actual academy players making it to Chelsea. Now, we can't exactly pretend like we've had loads until Frank Lampard was here, because before that, it was basically John Terry, and then kind of Loftus-Cheek, I guess, in and out. Were the only ones between John Terry and Loftus-Cheek. There was basically no one, right? Do you then have a worry that will become even less, or another worry that we will also then send the UK youth players out to the feeder clubs, and then potentially we won't have more Mason Mount and Reece James, who have been at the club since they were 8-9 years old, and then by the time they make it into the first team are fully fledged Chelsea people. While if when they're 15 you send them to some club in Belgium, and then they turn 17 and then you send them to the club in Portugal, and then when they turn 20 you bring them to Chelsea. If they have to do these different clubs thing rather than going through the academy in their own club, will they then be less infected by the club? And that's kind of, not everyone agrees with this. I understand not everyone wants the Cobham Academy graduates, but I personally, at least to a lot of them, I can just, because I believe them when they say, how many players have you had that kisses, like Diego Costa kissed the badge and 2 months later demanded to leave in a January transfer window. You're like, well, that won't happen with a Cobham player, right? That type of thing. I'm not saying they will always be perfect, but that type of thing won't happen with a Cobham player. Are you a little bit worried that this kind of structure could diminish that side of the story in terms of local academy that we've built so well over the last 20 years, that will take a back seat now? Or do you believe that both can kind of coexist, if that makes sense?
I think they can coexist. I think ultimately, if you're good enough, you'll be picked. You'll get the opportunities. I think whether you have to go on multiple loans and then come back and make your opportunity, whether you kind of come straight from the academy and make the most of your opportunity. I think ultimately, if you're good enough, whatever structure's in place, you will get opportunities to play. Whether you're out on loan at multiple different clubs, you go on 2 or 3 loans and then you come back and then you're ready. If you're good enough, it doesn't really matter what route you take, you'll find a way to get into the team. You will get picked. But again, it could be a slight concern. You're thinking, right, we've already got all these players in the academy already, talented boys like Lewis Hall, who just signed a new contract extension the other day through to 2025. You've got Amari Hutchinson, who looks pretty exciting. What does that mean for these guys? Are they going to, are we going to bring in kind of some other guys from Europe their age that could turn out to be better? And does that kind of block them as such? There's always going to be pros and cons to it. And there's always going to be kind of a few concerns, but I don't think going down a multi-club model is necessarily going to be bad news for the academy. I think it makes it easier in terms of players that want to go out and get first team experience. You can send them to a club that you trust, and that you can almost demand for them to be played regularly. Whereas if you kind of loan out players just to a whatever club, there's not always the guarantees that they're going to get the football that they required. Whereas you can, to some extent, you can control it when you send them out on loan to feeder clubs. You can get them regular minutes, and you can kind of monitor it much better. So there's definitely pros and cons. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing for the academy, but then I suppose you can't say it's a 100% good thing either.
Absolutely. Now, something has just come out. Sorry, Charlie, that I didn't react quite as much as to what you said. But a tweet by Ben Jacobs has just been released. Let me just highlight it so we can actually talk about it. Salzburg have basically released a statement.
They're doing a Brighton.
Brighton? Did I say Brighton?
No, they're doing a Brighton when they said that.
They're doing a Brighton.
Coming. They're doing a Brighton. Yeah, they are.
Exactly. They're doing it. Remember when Brighton said we're not getting Cucurella? That's what's happening here. Also, after their Bundesliga, Austrian Bundesliga game against Rapid Vienna yesterday, one of the higher ups at Salzburg also said, well, I haven't heard anything, so I expect him to stay as a contract until 2026. Well, it's one of two things. Either they're giving it the big one, no one's leaving, or they just want a little bit of extra money to let him go. Come on, this is I know it's Red Bull, but it's Salzburg. Salzburg, come on now. If Freund, who's been with them since 2006, I know they're pricks at Red Bull, but surely some guy that has given you basically his entire life since 2006, they're not going to stop him from going to Chelsea Football Club from Salzburg, are they? But they say, confirming they expect Christoph Freund to stay, despite the sporting director verbally agreeing to Chelsea. As Red Bull Salzburg has never been contacted from Chelsea to talk about any transfer details of Christoph Freund. We expect him to stay. Now, Pies, what's your reaction to this? Do you think they're kind of just doing a Brighton, or do you think this is something to take seriously?
Probably just doing a Brighton, to be fair. I mean, Fabrizio's already dunked on one of these clubs once, so let's see if he comes out and replies to the
you're
statement.
risking it,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if a journalist with that much credibility would risk an exclusive like this. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just kind of gives me Brighton vibes, to be quite honest with you. But who knows? I mean, has never been contacted from Chelsea. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously we're doing that soon. That's the whole thing, right? We've contacted him first, and then we're going to go to Salzburg. And I mean, I'm sure Freund has spoken to them anyway. I doubt he would have just, like started discussions without speaking to Salzburg. I mean, he publicly spoke about Chelsea with the game and said, you never know what happens in the future and stuff like that. Like, we expect him to stay. Well, yeah, you expected Cucurella to stay at one point, but again, until he's officially not your employee, of course you expect someone to stay.
Yeah.
Like,
it's either Cucurella / Brighton, or it's a Rafinha, and we've had a stinker. Now we've agreed personal terms too soon, and forgot about the other part. But personally, I don't see this not happening at this point. But we'll have to wait and see. But Pies, I'll take it back to you. Unless Charlie, you have something to add to what you just finished upon before I got this one up?
No, I don't think so, mate. Crack on.
There you go. Python, similar question to Charlie, really, because that's kind of the most important thing. Do you see that concern that if we have feeder clubs, that the academy itself will have to take a step back almost, or do you think they can coexist? And then to that question previously that I asked to Charlie in terms of kind of the how I can see this working, if that makes sense, players get older, therefore then their experience, you push in some more younger ones, and then you also buy one or two, at least, if not every summer, every 2 summers, you sign some huge player. Do you think, first the question in terms of can academy and feeder clubs coexist? And then also, do you think that's how the system can work?
Might sound a bit harsh, to be honest with you, but I don't really care about the academy as much as everyone else does. I'm just focused on putting a team on the pitch that can challenge for trophies. I don't really care where they come from. Obviously, it's nice that Reece James and Mount are from our academy. There's a little bit of excitement about that, but for me, I just want a team on the pitch that challenges for trophies that can match the expectations that I've known Chelsea to be ever since I've supported them. So that's my concern. Where they come from is less of a concern to me personally.
First, I do understand that as well. In terms of the system working as a whole, do you see that as a valid option? Because, like I say, I guess once this structure works, and this will take a few years to actually get to that point, but once the structure works, you don't really need that many big name signings on a regular basis. Because if you're signed, even think of the players that we've signed recently. Think of the Kai Havertz, think of the Christian Pulisic, think of the Ben Chilwells, think of the, don't know, I'm sure there's a few others, right, that we've signed at a reasonably young age. If we turned those signings and we pretended they were all great signings and they stay now for 10 years or 7, 8 years, each of them, then obviously in a few years' time, they will all be experienced players. So then you don't need to sign a 28-year-old for a lot of money because you already have the 28-year-old that's really good and worth a lot of money. You could just bring another one like a Rafael Leao, or in a few years, someone different from that age group that is potentially really expensive, because you can't get everyone at 16. It's impossible. No matter how good your scouting system is, can't get everyone. But then we still have the money available to buy that every now and again, that huge star player, whatever position that may be, by then selling the feeder clubs players that aren't quite good enough to make it to Chelsea. Is that how you envision it potentially going in an ideal world, Pies?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, as I said earlier, I want it to be kind of a mixture. I don't want it to be... I guess what I'm most concerned about is that kind of what they're doing with Graham Potter right now. It's like the whole message of, okay, just wait to see what we can be. Like, this is a transition. This is a project. Like, yeah, okay, but I want to win. We're Chelsea. You know what I mean? I don't want them to say next summer, go and sign 4 players to go into the first team, but they're players that have potential and that we will most likely see the best of in 2-3 years' time. No, I want to win now. You know what I mean? This is Chelsea. We need to have a mixture of that. Like, I'm okay with signing, I don't know, I don't even know what sort of... I'm not a scout. I don't know. Say we sign a player that goes into our first team that is, again, maybe more of a project signing. Okay, yeah, that's fine. but you also need to balance that out with ready-made players like a Raheem Sterling, like a Koulibaly. You know what I mean? You need to have a balance.
But that's what I mean, though, Pies. Do you need a Koulibaly and a Sterling in 5 years' time when Mason Mount is Raheem
But
Sterling?
you need them now to compete, though. That's what I'm saying. I don't want us to.
Now I agree completely. Yeah,
and it'll be the same going
do you
forward.
worry that they're not going to do that really? Because we did it this summer.
Well,
so that's why I'm not really worried that they're not going to do it next summer.
I can't predict the future, but with the way things are going in terms of like who they've appointed, even Graham Potter, like again, what's he done with sort of his club so far? They've signed players that are younger players that have potential and that he's made them better. Okay, we can do that, but can we get them to a level to where we are at the standards that Chelsea, are known to be at, competing for trophies? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want us to fall off.
I do know what you mean. It's just difficult to know, really, because obviously none of the clubs that Potter has worked at have had the financial means to sign a 27-year-old ready-made superstar like Raheem Sterling, right? They didn't have those means, whether as a pool of club or financially. So who's to say that Potter won't actually want to do that? But this is now the first opportunity he gets where he has that possibility.
That's what I'm really interested in, is like, do Freund, if he does become that sort of actual director of football, him and Potter, do they not only look at sort of outside leagues that are not really looked at, like where Moises Caicedo came from, but do they also then look at, the ready-made leagues? They look at the bigger leagues, like the Ligue 1, the Premier League. Do they still go for, like, I don't know, for example, how we went for like Rafinha, right? He was a ready-made Premier League player. We go for, maybe we still go for Declan Rice, or do they then put that off and just go for these development players, which I think would be I don't know whether it'd be a catastrophe, but it wouldn't, you know what I mean? It wouldn't guarantee immediate success. Like, I don't want this whole project thing to be overwhelmed on Chelsea fans and sort of we lay back and accept, we've got to wait 2 years now for a trophy. No, we don't. We've never waited that long. Don't start that mentality now. That's
both have to see it happen at the same time. It can't. We can't just
exactly. That is my concern. That is my worry and my issue that I have at the moment. And only time will tell whether my worry or concern is validated or not. I hope not, because again, Todd Boehly, as you said, he doesn't seem like a guy that, although he likes young talent, he doesn't seem like a guy that doesn't want, almost the best in class.
It's just like what he did with the Dodgers. Like, I know it's a different sport, but the guy didn't go in and say, let's wait another 3 years to win a trophy. No.
Look, Fabrizio
said he's won basically every trophy since he's turned up. Yeah. So
Fabrizio said earlier on this afternoon that Todd Boehly wanted to sign Erling Haaland this summer, but couldn't for the timing.
Because we were too late, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, like these are the best in class signings that we still need. It's that balancing act that he's got to get right, and it's going to be interesting to see how him, Potter, McCauley, and maybe even another one, maybe 4 people work at the same time. It's exciting, but it's also worrying.
Think about it. We had Marina and Emenalo at some point. Then we had Marina and Cech at some point. Now, presumably, Boehly will eventually take a step back. So that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a Freund and somebody else and Potter, because we had Marina and Cech, we had Marina and Emenalo. So, like, clearly 2 people too high up can work. And then if you just appoint the right 2 people that don't get into each other's hair and have too many differing opinions, I guess then it can work. But Charlie, do you see Pice's concern? Do you share the concern, or are you more hopeful that that's not going to be something that we have to worry about?
I mean, well, ideally, you want the 2 to coexist. You want us to be able to kind of bed in this new structure, build for the present and the future, and still maintain winning trophies, because that's what we've always done. I mean, since us lot have been following the club, we've never gone more than 1 season without a trophy. So you don't want to start kind of entertaining that kind of mindset that, it doesn't matter if we don't win any trophies for a few years because we're building something special for like 3-4 years time. You want to be able to build something. Maybe that's why we're
sacking off the Champions League. Make sure we come third so we can make sure we win the Europa League.
But like maybe like the 2 can coexist. You can build something while still being successful on the pitch. It doesn't, like, one doesn't have to be at the expense of the other. Yes, we may have to slightly readjust our expectations, in terms of how competitive we're going to be in the league, how many trophies we're actually going to win. But the aim should always to be there or thereabouts in challenging to win stuff while still developing that off the pitch. I don't think, one needs to necessarily take a back seat over the other one. You want to make sure that you're still winning. I think Boehly's always said that, he wants to come here and he wants to win. Boehly's about winning. And he wants to win on the pitch. He wants to win off the pitch. So for me, I don't know. Like, I feel that, if we weren't to win anything this season, okay, we'd be pissed. But if it went in the long term, if it meant in the next couple of seasons we picked up a few trophies, you'd probably have to take it. But yeah, I think the two can coexist alongside each other. You can still be successful on the pitch whilst putting together a successful structure, like kind of outside as well. So I don't think the two. I think the two can coexist, and there's no point, sacrificing kind of one for the sake of the other.
Absolutely. Now, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, like Remy says, smash that like button, please. Also, do subscribe if you're new here. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. But this I wanted to highlight, quickly talk about. Kenny says, if it's true, are we going to be Red Bull Chelsea? And I think that's as far from the truth that you can be, actually, because
it's not even possible. It's not possible.
Quite literally, it's impossible. But also, I think if anything, we are gonna be rivals to Red Bull. In terms of, if anything, we're going to do something similar to what they do, hopefully, in an ideal world, even better, and make them look silly. Which, in my opinion, be the greatest thing I've ever had in my life. But I guess that's the idea. I mean, who knows what we're going to do once Freund is here after Salzburg have accepted and stopped doing a Brighton. Who knows? Maybe we're going to make use of their academy in Africa, where that's how they get all these African talents. Maybe we're going to make use of a lot of their scouts, and maybe we're even going to make use of having that Red Bull connection, and that's why we're aiming to get someone like Nkunku, because now we will have Freund, who knows all the people at Red Bull. Maybe that will make getting Nkunku easier. Maybe that will make, I don't know what other names, like name whoever, like there's not that many there that you'd want these days, but every now and again. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe Sesko. Maybe if we get Freund, maybe that gives us a much bigger chance of getting Sesko. Now, how good will Sesko be in a few years' time? Who knows? Now, my friend, who is the guy that told me all the things I told you earlier about Christoph Freund, he says at that age, Sesko is quite a bit better than Haaland was. Now, will that mean he will be better than Haaland at 21? Maybe not. But apparently at 18, he's quite a bit better than Haaland was at 18, which that's a big statement to make considering how good Haaland was at 18. Do you know what I mean? So, maybe we can take the benefits of this, but I don't think we will ever be Red Bull Chelsea. If anything, we will be rivals of Red Bull. And don't I love anything more? A couple of things that we should discuss. And boys, obviously, if you have anything else to add on to this whole topic. Games postponed, of course, but Chelsea played a friendly against Brighton behind closed doors, but with all the players that were basically not involved against RB Salzburg in midweek. And we won the game 2-1, I think. Chukwuemeka with both goals off the bench. So, great news. Big up Chukwuemeka. Also, apparently, well, it came from the Sun. So, Pies, maybe you can shed some more light on that, whether we should believe that or not. But apparently, Armando Broja has been, or Broja, I'm still not 100% sure how to pronounce his name. Chelsea, if you watch this, can you please release just a YouTube short, Twitter, whatever, like Insta Reel of Armando Broja just saying how his own name is pronounced so we can all just say it right, please? Like, come on. Just do it simple for all of us. But anyway, apparently he's been impressing Graham Potter, and he might be, edging closer to a starting spot, which is quite interesting. But Pies, first of all, should we take that report on Broja seriously, or not?
I mean, it came from the Sun, but they do have two good writers. One of them was Alan Nixon, who did say that. So yeah, potentially there could be something in it. I think him, Alan Nixon, and Andy Dillon are really the ones that have got quite a bit right, despite the outlet and the controversy that they do work for. But yeah, I mean, potentially, there's not been anyone else report it, but yeah, again, the behind closed doors game definitely did happen as well. I had that info, which was really good, so I was hoping that came true, and it did. So yeah, that was good to see. And Chukwuemeka scoring both goals is obviously very impressive as well.
Absolutely. Charlie, I mean, not much to say because unfortunately we didn't get to see the game. Again, those are the things, like, I understand they don't want to show too much, but I'm like, okay, well, if we played, everyone would have seen it as well. Boehly is trying to make us this bigger brand. Surely for brand purposes, they should have streamed this game. You know how many views that would have got? Because after the Liverpool game was postponed, we just randomly decided to play a game with Brighton. And if everyone takes it seriously enough, like, surely.
Like, people would pay for that as well. People are starving. Like, people would pay a £5 to watch that. Like, no doubt. Millions would. You know what I mean? So, again, yeah, I do agree with you with that. It's just like, again, you'd have to make sure, though, it'd be like, I don't know how you could make sure that only Chelsea fans access it, but that would, because obviously other teams and managers would watch what Potter's doing, unfortunately.
Yeah, there you go. But Charlie, much of a thoughts? We won 2-1 against Brighton. The players that didn't play against Salzburg involved. Chukwuemeka getting 2 goals. Positives?
Yeah, it was positive. It's minutes in the legs. It's more. It's more time for Potter to kind of assess the squad, get across his ideas to players that might not feature as regularly, and it's an opportunity as well for those players to kind of show the manager what they can do, regardless of whether it's a behind closed door game, whatever it is. Like anytime you're on the pitch in front of the manager, you've got to take it. So someone like Chukwuemeka coming off the bench and banging in 2 goals, that's going to do his chances the world of good. I think the gaffer was impressed with him. But yeah, obviously, because we haven't seen the game or anything about it, we can't really comment too much other than the fact it's just good to get minutes in the legs, work on that fitness, and it's a chance for Potter to better assess the options that he's got at his disposal as well. And I guess it was good that Zakaria played a half as well, because we haven't seen him feature at all. He's been unused sub in both the Champions League games. Hopefully, he was kind of building some fitness up so we can maybe see him feature when we come back in October, because we're going to need him when we're playing 9 games, playing every couple of days or whatever it is. So we're going to need those guys to all be fit.
Absolutely. And I mean, there is certain players like Chukwuemeka who will have a month off for the World Cup. So, a lot of these players, they can certainly handle a lot of football now because then they have a month off after that. Now, Koulibaly, I've not really paid attention to this, but someone in the chat made a fair point. Now, in future, now it's up on screen already, and now it's too late. But in future, please change your profile picture, because if YouTube have a bad day and, there are certain algorithms don't like things, I can't exactly show that on screen too much, can I? But now I've had it on screen already because they didn't pay attention to that. So now I might as well read it out. Appreciate the second donation, though. I did miss it earlier. This fan base is so bipolar. Spend years crying over not having a director. We get one, but he's not known in the football world, so he's not good enough. I do see what you mean, mate. I can't disagree. Now, like someone else said in the chat later, he is known in the football world. I think everyone knew that Salzburg do a good job, but not a lot of people knew the guy that was in charge of it being Christoph Freund. You know what I mean, he's an Austrian that never worked outside of Austria, so he's not exactly going to be globally known, which is totally understandable. But yeah, I do agree with the sentiment in general. And Pies, to you, we were asking for someone like this. I was asking for someone like this. My personal ideal world would be to have Marina and give her Freund. That, in my opinion, would be an ideal one. Now, how well they would work together is a different question, right? But in terms of, in general, someone that does the buying players and that side of things, like Marina negotiating, and then you have the Freund guy who builds the project in the background, who knows all the people, who knows all the scouts, who knows, you know what I mean? Like that together would be my ideal one, which is why I'm still hoping and feeling that it might be possible that we'll get this other person too. But do you agree with the super chat regardless, Pies, that people are just weird to cry, or do you see why people are a bit like,
not really?
Could we have gone for someone bigger?
No, not really. I mean, I mean, I don't know who he's directly targeting here. Maybe it's people in the chat, but if it's us, I mean,
no, I don't think he meant us. Actually, I think he meant more a lot of people on Twitter and this chat and stuff.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're just having the discussion. I think it's right to have reservations.
Absolutely.
We can't just. It doesn't mean that we're not excited or that we don't think he's good enough. I think the whole argument we've been having, if it is towards us, that we don't know if he's good enough. That's why we're talking. So to sort of bounce
anyone
ideas
who
off each
pretends
other.
to know for sure that Freund is good enough is lying anyway.
It just sounds like
he's good enough at that level, but there's no proof that he's good enough at our level. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, sounds like some sort of comment I would get in my Twitter mentions where I say something.
I don't think he was actually targeting that at us. Actually, judging by what he usually says.
I hope not, but I hope not.
There you go. Now, I mean, Moussa Diaby rumors. I guess someone mentioned it. Pies much to that. To me, I mean, I know he had a good season last season, 13 goals, 12 assists, but I don't want another Bundesliga player that, other than one season, was known for missing sitters left, right, and centre. At least that's what I knew him as. Maybe I knew him wrong, but that's the opinion I had of Moussa Diaby from Bayer Leverkusen. At least that's the opinion I had.
Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. I think there was more links to Newcastle last summer, wasn't there? I think he was close to joining them actually, but I don't think they paid up.
Apparently we were just impressed after we watched Callum, and now that we saw more of Diaby, and you're like, actually, he's quite good.
Oh, great, yeah. So just another young winger, just because we've seen him play. That sounds like Chelsea to me.
It does, absolutely does sound like Chelsea. Fantastic. Is there anything else we should probably still get through? I don't really know because, well, obviously they took all our games away. We only played one game, which you can't even really go much by the starting 11 because Thomas Tuchel in his first game also just chucked the experienced players in. So who knows what Graham Potter's going to do? I just hope that one of two things: either Broja starts the next game or Aubameyang's fit. Because I'm not there. Oh yeah, we should talk about this, Pies. Remember after the last game, and we'll include Charlie in it. I was saying I don't understand why Aubameyang plays, and I didn't understand it in the first game against Zagreb under Tuchel, and I didn't understand it against Salzburg under Potter. Because to me, he doesn't look fit. And then he sits there after the game and says, I'm not at 100%. It will take me a little while. Like, you know, it's uncomfortable with Havertz, blah, blah. And like you said, how does that happen? Do the players not tell the managers? But if I see it, and I'm not saying everyone saw it, but if I see it, the players shouldn't have to tell the manager that they're uncomfortable. If I can see that they're not going for a header, as I'm a striker, he's not your left back. Like, or if Sterling doesn't go for a header, all right, who cares? But it's the striker. The striker needs to go for headers, man. So I'm not like, I know, Pies, you said that maybe they just don't tell the managers, but to me, it's like, well, you have your own eyeballs. Do you know what I mean? We don't have a blind manager, so you know, should figure out himself. But what do you think? What do you think of that in hindsight? Do you find it even more weird that he played then, especially with Broja being the way he is?
I do. It was also, I mean, the outlet that Aubameyang spoke to was a smaller Spanish outlet. I think it's well, they're not small. I think it's AS. I think they're called. But the journalist he spoke to was kind of a smaller journalist, and he messaged me and said, "Look, Aubameyang, I've got some quotes for you." So I was like, "Okay." I just found it interesting that he doesn't speak to a bigger outlet, and that he says, "Look, I'm not 100% yet." I thought that was quite interesting, but. Yeah, I mean, it's up to the manager.
How he played and how we played. No, none of the big outlet asked him for an interview.
I don't know. That's kind of like, well, why don't you tell your concerns and tell the manager that you're not 100% ready, rather than a Spanish outlet that's outside the ground. Like,
and if he did tell the manager, why did the manager play you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what he does after the national break. Again, I mean, against Palace, we might see... I don't know what we'll see, because, again, the majority of the players aren't there. Is he going to put players based on merit that are the ones that have stayed? Maybe we do see like a trickle maker, or does he go for more experience, So be interested to see with that as well.
Absolutely. You know what I found when I ask you on that, Charlie? Chilwell being called up to England, what the fuck? Like, why is Chilwell being called up to England? Well, clearly, what the guy needs is training, and not flipping going on international duty when he has no chance he will be included in the World Cup anyway. You're just taking him away from working under a new manager. I hate Southgate. Like, that's my favourite thing about appointing Graham Potter, is that we just pissed off the FA. My favourite thing about it all. Can't lie. But, like, do you find that weird? And then your thoughts on the whole Aubameyang potentially playing...
Oh, well, with the Chilwell one, obviously, ideally, from a Chelsea perspective, you want him to stay and train. But at the same time, he's not been getting the most minutes at Chelsea, and you'd expect him to get minutes for England. I mean, Luke Shaw's been terrible this season. That Malacia is playing ahead of him at the moment, and he was at Feyenoord last season. So Shaw isn't really playing for United, and I mean Chilwell is getting a mixed amount of minutes at Chelsea. So I mean you'd have to say that Chilwell will probably actually go and get minutes. So I mean I don't think it's not the worst thing in the world, but obviously ideally you'd like him to stay at Cobham and get some training under his belt and whatnot, work on his fitness. But I guess there's no substitute for playing minutes, and I would expect him to at least get some minutes. But in terms of Aubameyang, I would just say him as you boys. I found it straight. You could tell when you were watching him that he didn't look comfortable with the mask on. He wasn't fully committed to going in for challenges, going in for the ball, particularly aerially. He looked like he was playing well within himself. He was holding himself back a bit. It was very apparent against Zagreb, and it was equally apparent against Salzburg as well, that he wasn't getting in the box. He was kind of just not really doing anything. And it's not the Aubameyang that we've seen play in the past. He's not fit. So just like, surely a half fit Aubameyang, how can you pick that over a fully fit Broja? Like, by all means, chuck him on for 20 minutes at the end or something. But starting with him, I just don't get it, because you can clearly see he's not fit. And if we can see it and everyone else can see it, I don't understand why the manager can't see it. But then on the flip side, Potter's not stupid. Like, he would have asked Aubameyang, look, are you fit to start? Are you good enough to play? So it should be at that point, I know you always want to play, but surely, the Aubameyang's going to be like, well, actually, do you know what? I'm not 100% fit. I'd be better coming on for half an hour. Like you'd expect those conversations.
At the same time, you know, every player says that though, right? You know how Thomas Tuchel spoke about Ben Chilwell. He's like, so it's like that's kind of the manager's job to know when a player is whether he's lying or not. Kind of, I guess, it's part of your job.
Can be a little bit of a cop out as well, like, you know.
Yeah, also true. But you know,
like I didn't score this game, so he's like,
Shaw being in bad form. Sorry, he's gonna play Trippier at left back anyway.
So, he better not.
Yeah, he will. He did at the Euros over Chilwell, and then Chilwell was in great form. So now what? You know what I mean? Like, it's just weird. But it is true. Luke Shaw is not in good form, so I guess maybe that gives it a bigger shot. Is there another English left back that I'm not aware of?
I really like Rico Henry from Brentford, but he doesn't go for the smaller club players. Unfortunately, never gives him a chance.
Tony now, but
yeah,
maybe he's banging goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. But yeah, it is true. As a couple of people have said in the chat now, Aubameyang does look more fit now, but it was also just training. So right. And he was wearing a mask, but was he not wearing the mask because it was training, or was he not wearing the mask because he's fully fit? We don't know. We'll have, but I would assume he'd be a lot fitter or fully fit by the time we play Palace. But I'm still personally of the opinion that it should be Armando Broja that plays rather than Aubameyang. Boys, is there anything else that you want to add or think that we need to add either to the Christoph Freund situation or anything else? I can't really think of anything. I think we've covered it pretty well, if I'm honest.
It's mad, isn't it? Like we're so used to having stuff to discuss with Chelsea. There's normally always something happening, and then you got 2.5 weeks till we're playing, and like other than the sporting director, there's like
and that gave us at least something. Imagine we didn't have a sporting director.
Well, exactly. You're thinking like, well, what have you got to talk about for in a 2-week gap? And there's basically nothing. So it's a good job this sporting director thing has happened, because otherwise you're struggling for things to like that are going on with Chelsea at the moment. There's not an awful lot happening at all.
I mean, I guess what I could say is like maybe just get your thoughts and opinions on the whole N'Golo Kante situation, because I think 2 days ago Fabrizio said that Chelsea had offered him a 2+1 deal. And Ornstein said it. He said that obviously it's not. He's not accepting it. He wants longer, and he also updated it by saying that Chelsea are now in real danger of losing Kante because it's gone very quiet, and that they need to talk to obviously Graham Potter and the new director. He doesn't see Chelsea offering a long term, no longer than 2 years. So he said like it's getting more of a dangerous territory now, which I think is very interesting, because I also think that Jorginho could leave as well. And then this kind of ties up with, so that was 2 days ago, and then it was like I think a few hours ago, Adam Newson said that his sources had said that they'd started already looking at midfielders for next summer, which to me tells me that they've kind of concluded on at least one player that's going to be leaving. So I think that's very interesting how it's sort of added up with the 2 days, and then that info on midfield then comes out. I don't know whether that's just joining the dots or whether that's actually info that's coming out of the club.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? The whole Kante thing, because 2+1 is already being generous with his injury record. I think we're already overdoing it with that. I think we shouldn't. With Maxim, we should give him his 1+1, if that. If I'm honest.
I think
hey, you're barely fit.
I was like, how are you? How are you?
I think under the
that. That's ridiculous.
Under the old regime, though, that it was very close to agreeing a 3+1, and I think that's basically what he still wants. But obviously, he's not going to get that. He's
crazy.
I mean, he's
unless
injury
it has
prone.
A drastic wage reduction in it, which I doubt.
Yeah, it needs a wage reduction, and it needs to be 2+1. Like 2+1. I mean, ideally, I'd say 1 with an option for another year based on hitting a certain amount of appearances or whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, as good as this guy is, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're regularly not on the pitch, it's useless how good you are. Like, you could be the best player in the world, but if you're not fit and you're not on the pitch, it's pointless having you. And it's the same with Kante. Like, he can still do a job, but the problem is, like, he can't even play 2 games in a row without getting injured. So you've got to make allowances for that, and like maybe just have Kante as a guy for key games, and then and that's that. You don't use him in any other way because his body is not operating in the way that it used to. But I mean, I obviously I think Jorginho will go out of the 2 of them. But I wouldn't.
We need to study into this, don't we, Charlie? As well with Kante's injuries, like
yeah,
we need I was. That's one thing I was like, well, just any manager that would have come in general. I'm really interested to see how they manage Kante. Like, what is the training like? Is it the fact that maybe it's just overload over the years and it's uncontrollable. Can he genuinely, or can we get him to a point of, a turnaround where can he start 5 games in a row, and then we rest him? Because right now, you literally is 2 games, and he gets injured.
Honestly,
it's ridiculous.
This decision of does Kante get a contract and how long of a contract he should get shouldn't even be a sporting decision. It should honestly be literally be taken by a doctor, because literally, because there has to be some sports medicine expert that can tell us whether he's always going to be very injury prone from now on. And if he is, I'm not even sad if he does leave. I know it's disappointing if he leaves on a free, but I don't need a player on big wages that's going to play less than 50% of the game a season. That's just 50% of the season is going to be imagine we had him available. That we can't do with that. You don't have time for that.
Does all these injuries not piss him off as well? Because it seems like over the last couple of years, he's just injured, then just comes back and he's injured. And he's just does that not do you not get to a point as a professional where you think, right, I've got to try and sort this out? I don't know whether you go and see specialists or what, because all these injuries, they're either muscle injuries or, they're all the sort of similar thing. So it's that sort it out or try, do something. There's been no reporting on anything that Chelsea have done to try and help him. Obviously everything doesn't get reported, but I'm just saying, I don't know, it's getting it's beyond desperation now. Genuinely, he could come back and be injured again within middle of October again. It's as a professional, do you not actually genuinely get fed up at that now? Is that not where's the red line? Yeah, so then why not try and fix it? It's Chelsea's medical team beyond the point of fixing it now.
The new sporting director should also have impact on the medical staff. By the way, as far as I mean,
look at City's guys, man. They send him to that doctor, don't they, in Turkey or wherever he's from, and he literally
Barcelona usually, I swear.
Yeah,
they always send him to Barcelona.
Yeah, it's crazy. They always sort their injuries out. It's definitely.
I guess maybe we're kind of starting that. Mind you, Fofana obviously had his medical in New York, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but Charlie, your thoughts on that Kante thing? Would you rather? I know you just said what you said already, but in terms of, like I say, to me, it should be a doctor's decision. If it's unlikely that he ever becomes more regularly fit again, then just let him go. It's unfortunate that we lose another player for free then, if that so happens, but it's better than giving him a 3-year contract than having for 3 years a player that can only play less than half the game.
No, I'd rather lose Kante for free than have him stuck on a 3-year contract with an option for a 4th year on big money, and we can't get rid of him and he's barely playing. So I'd rather lose him on a free and bring in I don't know, an Alvarez or wherever else they're looking at. But yeah, it doesn't make sense, to keep him around. You could argue, it's poor planning from the club. You can't let 2 of your starting midfield players enter the last year of their contracts with basically nothing on the table. Essentially, I mean, Jorginho, I think he's as good as gone. It's not even they don't even have any talks about a new contract.
I wouldn't be too sure about that with Graham Potter and Josh. I think Jorginho fits what Potter likes to do very well. It's just a question of does Georgie want
to stay? Does he want to stay?
The thing is, I was going to say that on transition, on the ball, 100%, but on transition,
it gets caught out so easily.
But it's even worse than obviously Tuchel's system, because Potter does play this almost 1-2 centre backs at time.
Mate, and it's so high up the pitch.
See the goal we conceded? It was literally if we do that against other teams, we're fucked. You know what I mean? So I would be interested to see what he thinks about Jorginho's future.
But yeah, that is very true. It's going to be very interesting. Like I said, I mean, there was a report today out of Spain that Jorginho offered himself to Barcelona. Simon Phillips retweeted it. I'm honest, Simon. I like you, but I have no idea why you would retweet that. The guy that came out with the story has 7,000 followers. Bro, he's less followers than me. Why is Simon sharing that? No, I don't understand this at all. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I think, ladies and gentlemen, Kante is back in training, at least according to Zakaria. Not in full training, but in relatively serious individual training, at least. So I guess that would be something. That's something. So maybe he's available for Palace. So we'll see for that. Watch France call him up and last short notice. Kante's back fit. Oh, we'll have him. Typical France thing to do. But I think, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to round it out here. Now, I'm not sure when I'll be back with another stream. Hopefully soon. But it kind of will depend on news, won't it? So, yeah. But, ladies and gentlemen, please do follow and subscribe to both of my wonderful guests. Charlie's channel is linked down in the description. Pice's website, chelseafc365.com, is also linked down in the description. Please check out both of them. Subscribe to Charlie. Like I say, help him get to 2K subscribers. It's getting ever closer. Subscribe to me if you haven't already. We're getting ever closer to 20K, I guess, even though we're a bit further away from that still than Charlie's of 2K, I will say. But get subscribed. Smash the like button as well on your way out. Charlie, Pice, thank you very much for coming on. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and we'll see you next time.